Imagine living 35,000 years ago. You're huddled inside a cave, the only light coming from a flickering fat lamp. On the wall in front of you, a hand has painted the outline of a bull, its legs running, its head lowered. But you're not looking at art. You're looking at a door. Somewhere behind that painted animal, the spirit world exists. And there is one person in your group who knows how to open it. That person is the shaman. The word shaman comes from the Tungusic languages of Siberia, introduced to the West by 17th century Russian explorers, but the practice it describes is far older. For tens of thousands of years, every human society had someone who could cross the boundary between the physical world and the spirit world. The tools changed. The rituals evolved. But the core question never did. What happens when a human being learns to see beyond what is in front of them? The oldest evidence of shamanic practice stretches back to the Upper Paleolithic, more than 35,000 years ago. In the painted caves of France and Spain, Lascaux, Chauvet, Altamira, archaeologists have found something that does not look like everyday decoration. There are geometric patterns, grids, dots, zigzags, spirals. There are hybrid figures, humans with animal heads, bison with human legs. There is a painting in the cave of the Trois Frères called the Sorcerer, a figure with antlers, owl eyes, wolf ears, and a human body frozen in a dancing pose. The South African archaeologist David Lewis Williams argued that these are not random images. They are the direct visual record of shamanic trance. When a human enters an altered state of consciousness, the brain generates specific geometric patterns, entoptic phenomena, grids and dots and spirals, before the visions become recognizable, animals and figures. The caves themselves, he proposed, were ritual spaces where shamans entered the underworld through cracks in the earth. The painted animals on the walls were not just pictures. They were spirit helpers, guardians of the threshold, doorways to other worlds. If Lewis Williams is right, then shamanism is not a Siberian curiosity. It is a fundamental human cognitive capacity, hardwired into the brain, as old as symbolic thought itself. The tools of the shaman were remarkably consistent across cultures. The drum was the most important. It was not an instrument for music. It was a vehicle. Siberian shamans called their drums horses. The rhythm, usually between 3 and 7 beats per second, matched the theta brainwave frequency associated with deep trance states. The drum carried the shaman's soul upward along the world tree, the axis mundi, or downward into the underworld. Without the drum, the shaman could not travel. The costume was equally functional. The antlered headdress represented connection to the animal world. The iron rattles and bells sewn onto the coat were spirit weapons, scaring away hostile entities during the journey. The fringe over the eyes served as a blindfold, helping the shaman turn inward. Every piece had a purpose. Nothing was decorative. The classic form of shamanism that scholars study comes from Siberia. Here, the shaman was not just a healer or a magician. He or she was the community's specialist in dealing with the invisible world. The French anthropologist Roberte Hamayon showed through decades of fieldwork among the Evenki and Buryat that the core relationship was one of reciprocal exchange. The shaman married a spirit spouse. The shaman negotiated with the masters of animals to ensure successful hunting. The shaman's power came from partnership, not domination. The initiation of a Siberian shaman was brutal, at least in the telling. The candidate would fall into a deep sleep or illness lasting days. During this time, spirits would dismember the candidate's body, boil the bones, scrape the flesh, and reassemble them as a new being. Only after this symbolic death and rebirth could the candidate truly see the spirit world. In some traditions, the candidate was literally taken apart by spirit animals. A bear would eat the flesh. A bird would carry the bones to a sacred mountain. The spirits would count the bones and, if the count was correct, rebuild the body with new powers. This is why many shamans carried amulets made of bone, reminders of their own death and resurrection. But shamanism was not confined to Siberia. It appeared independently on nearly every continent. In ancient Greece, the oracle at Delphi sat on a tripod over a chasm, inhaling vapors, speaking in trance. The god Apollo spoke through her, exactly the way a shamanic spirit speaks through its medium. The Pythia, as she was called, was consulted by kings and generals before every major decision. Her trance state, induced by ethylene gas rising from a geological fault, produced visions that shaped the course of Western civilization. In Norse Europe, the vulva was a seeress who sat on a raised platform while an assistant sang ward-locking chants to call the spirits. Her soul would leave her body and travel to other realms to divine the future, locate missing people, change the weather, or harm enemies. Neil Price, the archaeologist who reconstructed this practice, showed that Odin himself was a shamanic god. He hung on the world tree Yggdrasil for 9 nights, wounded by his own spear, sacrificing himself to gain knowledge of the runes. He sent his 2 ravens, Hugin and Munyan, across the world each day, a literal soul flight. He practiced Sire, a form of Norse magic that involved entering trance to see across time and space. The sagas note that this was considered unmanly, suggesting it was originally a feminine practice that Odin transgressed to gain its power. In the Amazon, shamans called Pei used ayahuasca, a brew made from the Banisteriopsis vine and Psychotria leaves, to induce visions. The brew contains DMT, one of the most powerful psychedelic compounds known to science. The visions it produces, serpentine pathways, geometric palaces, animal spirits speaking in human language, are strikingly similar to descriptions of shamanic journeys from Siberia and the Arctic. The chemistry is different. The neurobiology is the same. The ayahuasca ceremony itself follows a pattern found worldwide. The shaman sings Icaros, sacred songs, to guide the visions, to call protective spirits, and to heal the participant from spiritual illness. In the Arctic, Inuit Angakuk traveled to the bottom of the sea to negotiate with the sea goddess Sedna. When hunters failed to find seals, it meant Sedna was angry, and her hair was tangled with the souls of sea creatures. The Angakuk would descend through the icy waters, comb Sedna's hair, and release the animals back to the hunters. This is shamanism as ecological management, the shaman maintaining the balance between human needs and the natural world. In China, shamanism left traces that survive in the written language itself. The American sinologist John G. Lishi argued that the character Yu, which in modern Chinese means cause or reason, was originally a shaman's mask. In Shang dynasty oracle bone inscriptions, the king wore this mask to commune with ancestors. The Shang kings were not just rulers. They were head shamans, conducting divination for every decision from warfare to harvest. The Chinese archaeologist Zhang Guangji argued that Chinese civilization was a shamanic civilization, and that the jade Kong, a square tube with a circular hole, represented the axis mundi, the world pole connecting heaven and earth. The 3 pillars of Chinese shamanism were nature worship, ancestor worship, and time worship, embodied in the concepts of Shen, Gui, and Zhen. But in every region, shamanism faced the same fate. As societies grew from tribes into states, institutional religions replaced the individual shaman. The priest replaced the visionary. The temple replaced the cave. In Europe, Christianity suppressed pagan spirit work. In China, Confucianism absorbed and marginalized shamanic practices. In the Islamic world, Sufi mysticism incorporated shamanic elements but reframed them. Then something strange happened. Western scholars discovered shamanism and brought it home. In 1951, Mircea Eliade published Shamanism, Archaic Techniques of Ecstasy. He took scattered ethnographic reports and synthesized them into a single category. The shaman was defined by one thing: the ability to enter ecstasy and send the soul on a journey. The book became the foundation of modern shamanic studies. In 1980, Michael Harner published The Way of the Shaman, Developing Core Shamanism, the claim that beneath cultural variations, there is a universal set of practices anyone can learn. The shamanic journey, the power animal, the drumming rhythm. Harner extracted these from indigenous contexts and offered them as spiritual technology for Westerners. Critics called it cultural appropriation, yet thousands trained with his foundation. Neo-pagans, druids, and heathens integrated shamanic practices into revived European traditions. So here is the full picture. A Paleolithic shaman in the Chauvet cave, painting a lion on limestone by torchlight. A Norse vulva sitting on a high platform, singing to call spirits. An Amazonian pei drinking ayahuasca, seeing the serpent mother of the river. An Inuit Angakuk diving into frozen waters to free the souls of seals. And a modern Westerner in a living room, putting on headphones, listening to a drumming track, closing their eyes, and taking a shamanic journey. The caves are gone. The costumes have changed. The drums are made of different materials. But the core experience is the same across 35,000 years and every continent. A human being enters an altered state, makes contact with something beyond the ordinary, and returns with knowledge, healing, or power for their community. Shamanism is not one religion. It is the raw material from which all religions grew. Before there were priests and temples and holy books, there were shamans. And in some ways, there still are.